The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. This is Noel here from Commtech Distribution. Welcome. We are just going to give it a couple of minutes more. We'll start at around about 11:02, 11:03, just waiting for a few more people to join in on the webinar. So if you just bear with us there, we will be with you very, very shortly. Thank you. Okay, good morning again, everybody. It's Noel again here. So we're going to kick off. We're going to get the webinar started here. So first and foremost, I wanted to say thanks to everybody for joining us this morning. Welcome to the webinar. So our purpose of our webinar today is we're talking about ransomware, obviously a hot topic for everybody. And the nature of what we're going to cover today is recovering from ransomware. And what we're going to show you today, and what Yap will run us through, is how you can recover in minutes, in mere minutes, from a ransomware attack using the combined technology of StorageCraft and Oneblox. So the one thing to point out that obviously StorageCraft and Oneblox are very complementary products. They work together in a very, very good way. So we would like to point out that while they are very complementary products to each other, we would like to point out that each of the products actually work independently from each other as well. So if there's anybody out there who are using alternative products, StorageCraft and Oneblox are not locked to each other, and they will work very well independently as well. So before we kick off, just for those on the call here today who might be new to the world of StorageCraft or new to the world of Oneblox, just to give you a very quick update around StorageCraft and who they are. So we in Commtech Distribution have been distributing StorageCraft for around about a year now, and we can safely say it's been a very, very exciting journey. We've seen a lot of changes in the world of backup and recovery, and of course it was StorageCraft who helped us understand and helped us portray the message out to our partners a little bit better, that it's not just about backup and recovery, it's about business continuity, and that's exactly what StorageCraft brings to the table. So StorageCraft itself, founded in 2003, with global offices headquartered in Draper in Utah, offices then also in California and Asia Pacific. What's very important and very good for us here from an Irish point of view is that the EMEA HQ is actually based down in County Cork. So for anybody who might want to do a deeper dive or do a technical session or see the product and get to play with the product in person, you're always very welcome to join us down in the premises down in Cork, where we can meet you up with the right people for whatever part of the business you're particularly interested in. Very important for us to remember, for everybody on the call today, particularly as we are all resellers and distributors among us here today, StorageCraft is a channel-focused company. So at the moment, over 8,000 value-added resellers globally, over 10,000 MSPs and growing. So I think those numbers show how significant StorageCraft is to many people's business, both from perpetual and from an MSP point of view. Recent acquisitions, the one that's of real interest for us, particularly in relation to the call today, is the acquisition of Oneblox in January 2017, which of course has led us down the road of being able to look at the Oneblox solutions here. We can say that we have really and truly seen rapid growth and expansion across the portfolio with a number of different partners around the country, hence the reason why we're running these webinars, and we want to welcome you again to this today. No doubt we're going to take something valuable from from this today. The webinar will be recorded and will be made available to you on YouTube later on today. At any point over the course of the session, please do feel free to type in any questions that you have, specific questions that you might have relating to what Jaap is going to present to us, and we'll either answer those as we go through the presentation, or we'll take some time at the end of the presentation and we'll answer any questions that anybody has. In the meantime, I'm going to place myself on mute so there's no background noise, and I'm going to hand across to Jaap for the actual presentation itself. So thank you again, and I'll speak to you towards the end of the webinar. So over to you, Jaap. Thank you.
So hi Noel, good morning, and good morning to everyone on the call. As Noel said, my name is Jaap van Kleef. I'm one of the sales engineers working at StorageCraft. I've been with StorageCraft for about 2 years now, and as Noel said, it's an interesting journey. But I've got a strong background in data protection, storage, disaster recovery. I've worked for different vendors over the last 15 years, so spent quite a lot of time doing disaster recovery. So with StorageCraft, basically what we are saying right now is with the additions to our portfolio, basically we say that we want to provide our customers with limitless data availability and intelligent data management. And we do that by not only storing your data, making sure it's all safe, we also make sure that it's protected and that we can bring it back as quickly as possible in case you need it. So if you look at our portfolio, it's actually split into 2 parts. StorageCraft originally started with data protection and disaster recovery solutions. That's our ShadowProtect portfolio. It gives you a strong product that can help you to protect both physical virtual environments, allows you a very flexible recovery capabilities, which you can all centrally manage. And something that's pretty unique is we've got a full disaster recovery cloud service available for you as well, that can help you to recover your data and get access to your data literally in minutes instead of waiting for hours, if not days, to recover your data in case of a disaster. As Noel was already mentioning, a recent addition to the StorageCraft portfolio is our storage solution called Oneblox. And Oneblox, and we go into a bit more detail later on, Oneblox is going to provide you with scale-out storage, which gives you the features and functions that you would normally see only in the highest segment of the market, but will give you at a very affordable price. And it's a very easy to manage solution. Like we try to do with all our solutions, we try to make them as easy as possible for you to use and to manage. So first, we would like to go into our recovery solutions. So our recovery solutions, as the name says, it's all based around recovery. So we're going to make sure that in case you've got a disaster, you can recover from that disaster as quickly as possible. And disasters can be very broad. It can be things like floodings, maybe a fire in your data center. Of course, it could be that user that presses the wrong button and deletes the wrong files. And we want to help you to recover from all those issues as quickly as possible. Those recoveries always start with reliable backups, because if you don't run backups, you don't have anything to recover. So reliable backups is the starting point for all our solutions. Of course, you want to get copies of your data offsite. You want to then manage everything from a central console. Maybe if you're a small company, that might not be important, but if you're a service provider, or if you're managing multiple environments for multiple customers, you can manage them all from one central location. And as I was saying before, we protect both physical, virtual environments. So regardless if you're running physical servers, regardless if you're running virtual machines, being either Hyper-V, VMware, or basically any other hypervisor for that matter, we can protect your data there. And then we combine our backup and recovery solutions with a full set of cloud services, which basically means you don't have to build your own disaster recovery solution. We basically build it for you and we make it available for you. And that means that in case you have a disaster, you can actually switch to a copy of your data and your machines in our StorageCraft cloud, spin them up literally within minutes. And we will actually demo that in a short while. So when we talk about our solutions and we look at a typical environment, what we will see is we see an environment where there might be some physical servers, could be, for example, domain controllers, maybe a big SQL server or web server. combined with potentially virtualized machines. And I've mentioned VMware Hyper-V, but as I was saying before, it could be any hypervisor. We protect the data on all those machines. The management is done through the IT admins, and then all that data is first stored on local storage. That can be a simple Windows machine, it can be a NAS device, or it can be in larger environments. It can be a Oneblox device. Once we've got the local copy, we then offer replication capabilities to either a secondary location, which could be a service provider, which could be a second location from your own company, to get a copy of your data offsite. Other replication capabilities we have is to third-party cloud, so we can replicate to, for example, AWS, to get a copy of your backup data somewhere in the cloud. And then the third option we offer is to replicate not just to an Amazon cloud, but to the StorageCraft Disaster Recovery Cloud. And in our own cloud services, we offer not only file folder recovery, but we also offer to spin up complete machines in our cloud, ready to go when you've got a disaster. So let's take a quick look at the components. There's just going to be a couple of slides on that. I will actually show you how this works in real life as well. So as I was saying, this all starts with backup. We need to make sure we get a copy of your data as quickly as possible and as reliable as possible. So our solution, if we look at our backup solution, it's going to be fast, it's secure. We make sure that we protect your data. We can encrypt the data by password protecting it, so to also ensure that no one else has access to your backup data. As I was saying before, we treat both physical virtual machines in the same way. So there's no different solutions for physical or virtual. It's all the same solution. So for you, just an easy learning curve. Once you learn how to protect one machine, you can protect all machines in your environment. And it's not limited to Windows. We can protect both Windows and Linux environments. We also have full application awareness, which means we can do application consistent backups of things like Exchange or SQL. Because of the agent that we provide, we have that integration, and it makes sure that the data that we back up is in a consolidated state. Another important thing is we're not just protecting your data, we're making sure that we protect both your data and your systems themselves. Now, why is that important? We see a lot of customers that, for example, take backups of Exchange and just store the Exchange data, which is perfectly fine if you need that data today or tomorrow, maybe next week. But once you need that data a bit further down the line, then you might end up with a situation where you have the data in an older format. The application is not available anymore, which means you cannot actually use the data. I was recently speaking to a customer that actually needed, for legal cases, needed some emails that they backed up about 6 years ago. And they had the data, backup was perfectly running, but it turned out it was in an older Exchange format, which they couldn't read into their new Exchange systems, which meant they had to go back, rebuild a new system, find an old copy of Exchange, install that before they could actually restore their data. So by making sure that we protect not just the data, but the complete systems, we protect you from those issues, and it basically allows you to recover to that particular point in time very easily. Another thing we do is we protect your systems very frequently. So we can, of course, do the full traditional backups and then incrementals every day. But that still leaves you open to risks in case of, for example, ransomware. Let's say you're backing up traditional and you're backing up your systems once per day. That normally means you back up your systems every night. So your last backup was, let's say, midnight from today. Now you've been working all day, and then Friday, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, someone hits the wrong link and kicks off a ransomware infection, and suddenly all your files get infected. With traditional backups, that means that the only point you can go back to is your last backup, which was actually last night. So that means all the work you've done today, so every work you've done from today until 4 o'clock in the afternoon is going to be lost. With StorageCraft and our backup technology, we can backup as frequent as every 15 minutes. So that means you can go back to any point in time with a 15-minute accuracy. And that means if the infection happened at just after 4 o'clock, you can go back to your recovery point at 4 o'clock, or maybe at 3:45. So that means instead of losing a full day of work, you will only lose about 15 minutes of work. And that could save you a lot of work when you have to do that recovery. So how does it look in your environment? So you will have your system. So the first thing you do is you install our software, which is called ShadowProtect cross-platform. Once you've installed the software, you then apply some policies. You create your backup jobs. Those backup jobs are going to store their data onto a centralized storage device in your environment, which could be a Windows server, which could be a NAS system, or in larger environments could be a Oneblox device. So those backups are then being stored in those locations, and then when you need to do a recovery, you can basically go to any machine in your environment, or basically just install a new machine, and then you can recover your data from that centralized location very easily. And again, I will go into detail a bit later on. And like I said, we don't restore just the data. We can just restore single files or folders, but we can also restore complete systems. That means we restore the operating system, we restore the applications and the data. So that gives you access to your data in mere minutes. Of course, backup is just one piece of it. We need to make sure that we manage those backups. We need to make sure that your backup data is valid and is constantly rechecked. So we do remote management and monitoring. That's all through a small virtual appliance that you can manage through a web console. We can push out the agents. We can push out backup policies from a central location. So management of your environment is going to be very straightforward. Of course, we provide you with reporting that tells you if your backups were successful, if there were any issues with backups. And that's pretty important because you want to rely on your backup solution. You don't want to have to go in every day and look at all your systems individually to see if your backups are running, yes or no. With our solution, we can provide you with daily, weekly, or monthly reports that tell you exactly the status of your report and tell you exactly if your data is protected, yes or no. And then, of course, we've got all these kinds of alerts as well. As I was saying, in case a backup is not running, you get alerted straight away, so you know something is wrong and you can take actions before you run into issues. So that management, actually what's going to happen is you push the agents from there, you push your backup policies from that centralized console. Your backups start running. You can control those backups from that central location as well. Also very important, for example, when you do system upgrades, you can centrally pause a couple of machines, then let Windows updates do their thing. And then when Windows updates is ready, you can start all your backups again. So that way you don't see any interference of backups and updates running side by side. Again, alerts and reports are, of course, part of the solution as well. Now, we've taken our backups, we store them on a local device, but then you still run the issue that that local device might get hit by your disaster as well. So maybe it's a fire, so at that point you lose your servers, you lose your local storage, or maybe even theft. Wouldn't be the first time that people break into an office and find a server and then find the backup device next to the server and basically take both systems at the same time. So you want to make sure you get a copy of your data offsite. So we talk about replication of data. We can do just the replication of the data to an offsite storage. We can do a full offsite disaster recovery. So you replicate the data, and using the StorageCraft products, you can actually build your own disaster recovery solution. Or if you don't want to invest in a disaster recovery solution yourself, but you want us to do that, you can use the StorageCraft Cloud. And that will give you a full disaster recovery capability without having to invest in any hardware. We have done that for you. We make sure that it is available to you. And that is not just a cloud solution, it is a purpose-built disaster recovery solution. Everything is fully scalable. We make sure that everything is in tier 3 data centers, ready to go in case you need your data. You can recover complete systems. You can recover file and folders. We can even recover complete environments with multiple machines, including all network settings, etc. And when we talk about network, we can pre-configure that. So you don't have to worry about that. When you have a disaster, you can pre-configure everything. So actually recovering is just going to be hitting a single button. And you can do that yourself. Just log into our web interface, and I will show you in a bit more detail. So as I was saying, replication to our cloud, replication to third-party cloud, or replication to a remote data store. It is all supported with the StorageCraft solution. And then in the end, it's all about that recovery. So your backups don't matter if you cannot restore your data. So we basically offer you different kinds of recovery. Of course, we can do bare metal recovery. If you've been backing up a physical server and that server dies, we can actually just bring back that server, or you bring in a new server and you restore to that new server. It could have different architecture. So you could go from an Intel to an AMD server. You can go from SCSI drives to SATA drives. We got it all covered. So it's fully hardware independent. We've got a technology that will make sure that you can inject new drivers and you can use that new hardware if you need it. Again, we support both Windows and Linux for that, and also physical and virtual. And that's pretty important because that means I can back up a physical machine and restore it to another physical machine. But I can also back up a physical machine, restore it to virtual, or back up a virtual machine, restore it to physical, or even go from virtual to virtual. So maybe I'm backing up a machine that's running in VMware, but I want to restore it to an environment running Hyper-V. That's all fully supported. That's basically using all traditional restore technologies, which basically means you restore a machine, you wait until all the data is being copied back, and then you can start using that machine. But restoring data might take some time, time you don't have in case of a disaster. So we also have options like virtual boot, where virtual boot allows you, and it supports both VMware Hyper-V and VirtualBox, where VirtualBox allows you to spin up a virtual machine directly from your backup data without having to restore all the data first. So that actually means that you can access your data literally 5 to 10 minutes after you've initiated your restore. So you don't have to wait until your complete data volume, your complete Exchange server is restored. No, you do a virtual boot, and with that virtual boot, you get access to that server within a couple of minutes. Of course, that does complete system recoveries, file folder recovery. When we talk about Exchange, we can also do granular recovery of Exchange environments. So you can recover just a single mailbox or a couple of emails from one particular user. Same goes for attachments, emails, calendar items. So very granular if you need to recover. So when I was talking about the hardware independent restore, so this is an example. I can say, okay, I'm recovering from, I've been backing up a server with some older technology, SCSI drives, PCI bus, dual CPU. In this case, it's using a QNAP device to store a copy of the backups. We've taken our backups, the machine dies. Now I bring in a complete new server with different architecture. And through the hardware independent restore, we can restore that data and actually bring back a new server. And to do that, you basically use a recovery environment that we provide for you. So you can put that on a CD or a USB. You boot from that USB device or that CD, and then you recover that complete system literally in a couple of hours. I was also mentioning virtual boot, and that is a similar process, except for that we don't restore to a physical environment, but to a virtual environment. So the process is the same. We've taken backups, but now when we need to restore, we will actually have the VM talk directly to our backup storage. And that means that we will be able to spin up that machine very quickly without having to restore the complete data first. And I will actually demo that to you as well. So what I'll do is I'll show you a small environment that I've been running here. If I go to my environment, so give me 1 second. So hopefully you should all be able to see my environment. This is a small test environment. As you can see, it is running in VMware. There's a domain controller. There is a file server. There's an Exchange server. Let me just see what's happening here. I need to connect. So there's an Exchange server, and there is my centralized backup server. All these machines are backing up to this local device, and then on this device, I'm actually replicating data to different locations. So this is my image manager. This is not only making sure that the data is being replicated. So in this case, I'm doing 2 copies. I'm replicating to another machine locally in my environment, and I'm replicating into the cloud. Another thing that Image Manager does is it re-verifies the data. What we often see is customers that are running backups, and the backups are verified at the time the backup was taken. But due to maybe bit rot or maybe a ransomware infection, your backup data might get corrupted. And in most cases, you will only find out when you actually have to do a restore. So not with StorageCraft, we will actually run that verification every 7 days. So every 7 days, we re-verify your data, and we make sure that we can restore from that data. So I was talking about this data being replicated. So I've got my domain controller. It's running my backups. It's running backups every 15 minutes. Apparently something is going wrong today. There are some IO errors that shouldn't make a big difference. So we're running our backups every 15 minutes. And they are being backed up to a second machine in my environment. So I'm using, in this case, FileZilla. And if I check this environment and I go to this machine, I can see there is in my FTP folder, there is a folder called Replica Backups. And there's a copy of all my backups for my domain controller. And what I can do here is I can now restore that machine using technology called virtual boot. So what I'll do is I click on virtual boot. I'm going to say I want to add an image. So I want to add that from my FTP location, replica backups, domain controller 1. I select, that's always when you run. Why is this not working? I want to do virtual boot. I want to add an image. I want to take it from the FTP, StorageCraft, replica backups, domain controller 1. I think I just picked the wrong. Yeah. As I was saying, we protect our backups with, we encrypt our backups. So I just need to provide a password to make sure we get access to the data. As you can see, this is basically contains data for all my volume. So not just the C drive or the data drive. So it has this, the data, the system drive, but also all my data drives. It tells me I want to boot from the C drive. I click on next. This machine is actually running the Hyper-V role, so it pre-selects Hyper-V. I could also use VMware or Oracle, but in this case, we stick to Hyper-V. So I'm going to call this machine domain controller 1, and it is a virtual boot. And today is the 26th of January. I can specify how much CPUs, how much memory. I can say automatically start the machine after creating it. So let's just keep all that, and I'm just going to click on create. Now this process is going to take a couple of minutes, and once it's done, it has actually created the machine for us. So I've actually done that earlier today as well. So as you can see, this is actually a virtual boot I've done about an hour ago. So it creates the machine, and if I can just start that machine, and I just say start the machine, and it's gonna bring up a copy of my domain controller, but now on a different server in a different environment. So we leave that running in the background because the other thing I want to show you is the recovery that we can do in the cloud. So instead of going to another server in my environment, I will log into my StorageCraft cloud environment. So basically a single login that you get as a partner where you manage everything, not only your licenses, but also your recovery. for cloud services. So if I go to cloud services, I can see my StorageCraft cloud demo. And if I look in there, I can see there's 3 machines in there. There's my domain controller, my Exchange server, my file server. So if I just select this environment, I get a dashboard that tells me, okay, there's 3 machines. I've got a public IP. And as I was saying, there's things like networking that we can pre-configure, because it's nice that I can spin up 1 or more machines in the environment here. But it's also nice if I actually know how to connect to those machines and don't have to worry about that when there's a disaster. So you can pre-configure your networking. You can get access to those machines through IPsec, OpenVPN. You can request public IP addresses so you can access those machines. And if I go into these machines, I can actually, on a per machine basis, I can go in, I can see when I had my last backup, I can see when it was last created. My last backup was actually yesterday, 25th, just in the morning. And what I can do is I can spin up a machine directly from here. So let me just click on Launch VM. I'm going to say I just want to have this automatically destroyed. And I want to use my recovery point, not from yesterday, but let's say the day before yesterday. You see there's an option here called Real Failover. If I don't click this, it will spin up the machine and I can access the data, but it's not going to run any backups. In case this is a true failover, I'm actually going to click this, and that means it's going to do the same thing. It's going to spin up the machine, but now it will actually also start backing up that machine. So any changes that happen on that machine will now be backed up. It's going to back up every hour. And then it means if I need to recover data, I can recover from that data very quickly. If I click on Virtualize, it will now actually create a virtual machine in the cloud. Another option we have, so let's say someone deleted a file, I just want to get access to that particular file. I just go back to, let's say, the 19th, and I can actually click on Mount here. So I click on Mount, provide a password. That's going to take just a couple of seconds, and then I can actually browse through those files. Sometimes this could be very handy. I've been speaking to a customer that had written a full disaster recovery plan, and of course, they didn't print it. They just kept it as an electronic copy onto their server, and of course that server failed, which meant they had this plan but they couldn't access it. Through this option, you can actually mount at any point in time into this environment. It's taking a bit longer because we're running virtualization and mount at the same time. But once it's actually done the mount, you could then browse through these files and just copy a single file or folder from that server. Now, this might be handy if you just have 1 or 2 servers, but let's say you've got, in this case, I've got 3 servers, an Exchange server, a domain controller, file server. So one of the things I can do when I go into networking, I can actually build what we call a virtual machine policy. So the virtual machine policy, I can tell it to say, okay, in case there's a disaster, these are the machines you need to bring up, and you need to bring them up in this particular order. So I've got a domain controller, I've got a file server. I want to add my Exchange server to this environment as well. So I just provide the password for this. I tell it it can start after 60 seconds. Oops, I'm doing this wrong. I tell it to start after 60 seconds. I submit this. And then I can do a dependency. And that means that I now have all my machines. I've got all my dependencies. And that means if I now have a disaster, I can actually just click on Launch VM Policy. So Launch VM Policy, basically it's 2 clicks. I click, I want to launch this policy. It says, okay, I've got these machines. By default, it will use the most recent recovery points. You can say, okay, I know there was an infection or ransomware, so I want to go back to the day before yesterday for my file server. And then when you click Submit, it's automatically going to start all these machines in the right order. So it's going to make sure my domain controller started first, then it's going to, after 60 seconds, it's going to start my Exchange server, and then after another 30 seconds, it's going to start my file server. So I don't have to worry. This is also something I can pre-test. So very easy in case you've got a disaster you want to fail over. So let me just quickly go back to my machine. Let's see, it is still virtualizing, but at least I can browse my recovery point. So I can go to my software folder, I can go into my StorageCraft, I can find any document or anything I need. I just take the files I need. I say create zip file, and then once it creates the zip file, I can actually download the content for those files directly from the StorageCraft cloud. So very easy to recover data, not only locally, but also from the cloud. So it helps you to recover very quick, give you access to your data as quickly as possible. So let me just quickly check if my virtual boot on the other device was running. So actually I'm running both now at the same time. So let me just see. So it's actually making sure that the data is still valid. So it's running a check disk to make sure that the data is not corrupted on the C drive. Once it has gone through that check disk, it will actually boot up that domain controller. So we leave that running for a bit. We will go back after the second part. So that is our traditional portfolio for disaster recovery. So let me go back to my PowerPoint. And where were we? So as I was mentioning, we also have added a storage component to our portfolio, which is called Oneblox. And Oneblox is scale-out NAS storage that is very easy to deploy. It's actually object-based, so it will give you the flexibility and the scalability of object-based storage, but it will allow you to access your data as a simple file share. So with Oneblox, we provide you complete flexibility how to manage your data. It's actually cloud-based, so you can manage your storage from anywhere in the world. You just log into our cloud-based management, which then connects to your storage solution and allows you to manage it. If you don't want your storage to be connected to the cloud, you can also use a local instance to manage it with exactly the same capabilities. Of course, it has got built-in replication. Another thing is we provide you with continuous snapshots. So we make sure that your data is protected, and like with ShadowProtect, you can actually recover to a point very near to the infection. Another pretty unique thing is that we allow you to bring your own drives. Which means you can buy the device from us. So you buy the storage from us, but you can buy it without the disks and then bring your own storage. It's also very flexible because we don't use RAID, so it's RAID-less, and it's very flexible to expand if needed. So the biggest difference here is if you compare this with traditional storage. So traditional storage, based on RAID, you need to make a lot of decisions before you actually start implementing, before you start buying this. You need to make educated guesses about how much storage you're going to need, not only now, but also in the next 3, 6, 12 months, because it's normally not that easy to expand your storage. Also, from a performance perspective, you don't know exactly what you need. Maybe you know what you need right now, but it's very difficult to estimate what you're going to need in 3 or 6 months. So what we see is a lot of customers that are actually either over provisioning, buying way too much storage, paying way too much money, or not enough capacity. Which means they might end up with a solution that is functioning right now, but might not be functioning after 6 or 12 months. So what we want to provide you with Oneblox is we want to basically give you the full flexibility to start with a device that matches your needs right now, but make it very easy to scale out once you start growing. And start growing could be from a capacity perspective, so you might need more storage in 3-6 months, or you might need more performance. And with Oneblox, we can do exactly that. You can start with a single device with, let's say, just a few drives, let's say 6 drives. Then when you need more storage, you just start adding drives in that first device until it fills up, and then you can start adding more devices. And once you start adding more devices, you're going to make sure that you scale your performance and your capacity according with your needs. So what's the big difference? So if you look at traditional storage, that's all based on, or most of it is based on traditional block storage, which basically means every file is split into equal size blocks. Those blocks are stored on a number of disks, normally configured into a RAID set. The issues with RAID sets is that they're not very flexible. It's going to take a lot of time if you need to reconfigure RAID sets. If a single drive fails, then it could take a very long time to rebuild that RAID set, leaving you in a degraded state and potentially open for data loss while it's rebuilding RAID configurations. So you can access the data through block protocols, being iSCSI, Fiber Channel, or through file protocols. Now, recently we've seen the uptake of solutions using object storage, and object storage gives you full flexibility. So instead of using traditional RAID systems, we divide data into objects, and we store those objects basically into two separate pieces of data. We store the data itself, and we store the metadata. And through this technology, you're very flexible. You can scale out, you can add storage very easily. And typically it gives you better performance than RAID. Biggest downside with object storage is that you would need APIs because there's no way that you can directly store a file onto object storage. So you would need an application that understands object storage and has the right set of APIs to talk to that object storage. So what we've done with Oneblox is we've actually taken the best of both worlds. So we've taken the best of the object storage, so the flexibility, the scalability, the performance, but we've actually added a file protocol on top of that. So now you basically, any application that can access network storage, so either through Windows Storage SMB or Linux NFS, we can now store data onto an object storage. So if you look at our unique points is, so it's scale out, so we can start with a single device with just a number of drives, and then we can start adding more drives and more devices when you need them. It does provide inline deduplication compression. So whenever we store the data, we make sure that we use your storage as good as possible. So deduplication, especially if you use this as a backup target, is going to save you a lot of disk space, because especially backups tend to store the same data over and over again. So it will give you very high dedupe ratios, and of course compression as well. Also, we do what we call near continuous snapshots. So with StorageCraft ShadowProtect, we back up every 15 minutes. So we basically means you have potentially the loss of 15 minutes worth of work if you need to roll back to a particular snapshots. With Oneblox, we take snapshots as frequent as every 10 seconds, and we keep those for 1 hour. So that basically means that if you run into an issue, if you run into a ransomware attack, once you detect it, you can actually go back to literally 10 seconds before the infection started. So the amount of data you're going to lose is very minimum. I've already spoken about RAID-less data protection. So the biggest benefit is you can mix and match different drive sizes. So for example, when you build a storage solution with RAID, normally all the drives need to be the same size. So you make a decision, you want to start with 2 terabyte drives. It basically means that all the additional drives need to be 2 terabytes as well. With Oneblox, you can start with 2 terabyte drives, and then let's say in 6 months' time you want to expand your storage. You can get a good deal on 4 terabyte drives. You can then actually bring in 4 terabyte drives. And then maybe next year, 8 terabyte drives or 12 terabyte drives become more and more available. You can then actually take out a 2 terabyte drive and then replace it with a 12 terabyte drive. So that basically means you don't have to do any forklift upgrades. You can actually do in-place upgrades to your environment. And again, we can sell you the drives, but you don't have to buy them from us. So if you can get a good deal on Western Digital or Hitachi drives, you just go out and buy those drives. And all of that basically now gives you the ability to scale out from a capacity and performance. And of course, once you start adding more devices, also resilience. So with a single device, we can protect against the failure of any 2 drives. Once you start adding more devices, you can actually we can protect you against the failure of any 2 devices in an environment. So currently we support building an environment of up to 7 devices. In the near future, we hope to expand that to 21 devices. And this is all dynamic. Again, if there's a failure of a drive, you don't need anything like hot spares and then reconfigure. No, this is all dynamic. If we notice that a drive is failing, we will automatically start redistributing the data across the other drives until you add a new drive, and then we redistribute the data to that new drive as well. So that's all fully automatic. Also, when you add a drive, there's nothing to configure. You just plug in the drive, we will detect it, and we will automatically add it to the usable capacity of the environment. So when I look at, for example, Windows, which is where most customers are using this, so very straightforward. You just create a file share, which just looks like a file share on your network. But you don't need a Windows server, either running as a physical or a virtual environment, because we run the file share directly on the storage. Of course, we got full Active Directory integration, so all the security that you're used to when you're building your traditional Windows file share, you will still have. We can do other things, so we know exactly which users are accessing data. We can also set quota, so basically making sure that people are not consuming all the available space. And again, we can set the retention on the snapshots on a per share basis. So maybe your financial data you probably need to keep for 5 years. So you just set your snapshot retention to 5 years. If it's, let's say, test and dev data, you might want to keep it only for a week. So on a test and dev share, you just set your snapshot retention to just 1 or 2 weeks. So you're pretty flexible there as well. Now, just having one copy of your data is not going to be a good thing if you look at this from a disaster recovery perspective. So built into the storage is replication as well. So we can replicate. You can have your primary data in your main data center in San Francisco, where you've got your engineering and your backup data. And then through replication between Mon Blocks devices, we can replicate to a secondary location. And that replication can be one way, it can be two way. You can even build pretty complex replication schemes, many to one, one to many. Again, per share, you can determine if you want to use compression and deduplication. So it's all very flexible. And of course, we work, and Noel mentioned that before, Oneblox is not specifically tied to StorageCraft backup solutions. So if you're currently running Veeam, or if you're currently running Commvault or Symantec, our technology works as good with those solutions as well. So especially with, for example, with Veeam, we can use our storage as a scale-out backup target for your Veeam backups, and then replicate them to a secondary location. And because we do inline deduplication compression, we don't need petabytes of data to store all your backups. Especially with backups, we can compress and deduplicate them very nicely. So I was speaking about the management of the environment. As I was saying, this is a web-based management console. So instead of going through some slides, I actually just want to show you that interface. So let me just quickly break out there. I'm just going to go to my cloud-based console. So I'm just going to log in. I'm going to go to my StorageCraft environment, and we will see there is two environments there. There is my primary environment called StorageCraft EU. There's also a replica. So I can drill into there. I can see in this case there's only one system in there. I can easily expand it. If I need to create a share, it is, again, very straightforward. I just say I want to add a share. I just want to call this demo 2601. It's going to be an SMB share. I happen to have Max in my environment as well, so I can go in there. I just created, for the sake of this demo, with access to everyone. I want to do a custom scheme where I want to keep my data for 3 weeks, and I want to do compression and deduplication. And I'm just going to create a share. So literally within a matter of a couple of seconds, I've created a new share. If I need to set up replication, again, I can go in. So let me just find if I can find my the share I just created. Where is it? 2601. So I can select this share and say if I want to replicate it, I just say I want to replicate the share. Where do I want to replicate to? So it's going to go to my replica system. I just click on next, finish, and now I've set up replication. In case of a disaster, I can very easily change from the primary system to the replica system. I can just go in. So I just take another one. So I just select one, and I can say I want to promote this, which means my replica now becomes my primary one, and I can get full access to my data. So how does Oneblox help you with ransomware? So let's say I'm going to be hit with ransomware. So all my files have been encrypted, and I need to have very quick access to my data. I cannot wait a couple of days, pay my Bitcoins, and then hope that maybe I can unlock my files. No, I want to get access to my data as quickly as possible. So what we do, so let's say I've stored all my documents, so my PowerPoint presentations, my PDFs are all stored in a shared documents folder. I can see they've all been infected. So what I can do with Oneblox is I can very easily go back to a previous point in time. So in my shared documents, I can actually find a snapshots folder. And I can browse through my snapshots. I can select that snapshot that was closest to the point before I was infected. So I just pick any recovery point before the infection. And then again, I see my my Oneblox folder. And in my Oneblox folder, I can actually see my documents. So you can see you can have access to your data literally within seconds without having to do any recovery. You just go to that folder just before the infection, and then you can access your data. So this is what we've already seen. So we can, as I was showing, we can do this directly from snapshots. End users can also do this straight from their own Windows browser. So they just go into File Explorer, they just do a right click on the file, and we fully integrate with Windows previous versions. So you just do a right click, you click on previous versions, and you can access a previous version of that file. The same, of course, goes for complete folders or even complete shares. So just do a right click on a folder or share. Say you want to go back to that point before you were infected. You just do a right click and you say restore to previous versions. So that actually now given you multiple options to recover very quickly from disasters, not just ransomware, but any disaster that you might get into your environment. So let me see if there's any questions from you in the field.
Hi, Yap, it's Noel again here. Thank you very much indeed for that. That was really, really good. We do have a couple of questions that come through here, some commercial, one that I'd actually like to field to you if I could there. So we have a question here in relation to the ransomware side of things. So how often do you see ransomware coming up as being a problem? Obviously, it's something that we're all very aware of and something that we're all talking about. How often do you actually see ransomware striking people across, I suppose, across the EU? I guess is probably a better question.
Yeah, so I always answer this. I think for every company out there, it's not a question that if they're going to be hit by ransomware. For me, it's always the question, when are they going to hit by ransomware? People can be protected very well. They might have all their antivirus stuff and everything in place. But I was specifically mentioning things like a Friday afternoon. So we all know how this goes. Friday afternoon, people might find a funny link to a website. They send it to a colleague, say, take a look at this, and suddenly this site is infected. So I would say every company is going to be hit, regardless if you're a small or a big company. At one point, you're going to be affected by ransomware in one way or another. Another reason why normally this happens on a Friday is the ransomware people hope that you click this and then on Friday evening you go home. you then get back on a Monday morning to find your files affected. And that's where the snapshots, not just the frequent snapshots, but also the fact that you can determine how long you want to keep them is important, because that means the infection happened on Friday. You will only find out on Monday. You could still go back to that point in time on Friday afternoon just before your infection.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. The next question we have here is, where is the StorageCraft data center?
So the data center, actually for all our partners in Dublin and the UK, that data center is actually based in Dublin. And it's
Excellent.
a full tier 3 data center. We've got all the certificates in place. And actually, we've just got a recertificate, and we've run through some certifications. And last year we had an uptime of over 5 nines, so our uptime was 99.999%.
Wow.
So yeah, basically it means if you need access to your data, you can be pretty sure that your data is going to be available in our data centers.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, Yap. And that's very important maybe to note for any of our partners on the call here today who may be dealing specifically with the legal industry, that the fact that the data center is actually based here in Ireland, and that the data not only doesn't leave the EU but doesn't leave Ireland is a very strong point for us as well. Thank you very much, Yap. Next couple of questions, more on the commercial side, Yap. So I'll field these if I may. So we have here, is there any training coming up over the coming months? So yes, absolutely. We run a very good schedule of training courses across the StorageCraft portfolio. We have run a number of very, very well-received boot camps, technical boot camps. One just this week actually, and we do have another one which is coming at the end of March. So invitations will go out to everybody to join us for the hands-on training at the end of March. The next one that we have here is in relation to pricing. So pricing on the Oneblox solution. So that's a really, really good question. So what we do have is we do have a price list on the full Oneblox and StorageCraft range. So what we'll do is we will organize to send that out to everybody who's on the call here today. The one thing that we would like to just mention while we're talking about the pricing side of things is please do remember that there is an NFR program available for you to use as well. So if you're interested in looking at the Oneblox solutions for your own internal use, for your not for resale use, please give myself or Jared a call, and we'd be very happy to work with you on that. And likewise, if you do have special projects that you want to discuss in more detail, we'd be very happy to look at those with you as well. But we will send a general price list on to you after the call here today, and we will have a new one issued to you for the month of February, which will follow in a few days there as well. That looks to be all of the questions here at the moment, Yap. So I think we're all good here on this side.
Yeah, I don't see any questions here. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about this. I hope it's going to be useful for you. As Noel was saying, especially for the software, we have trial versions available as well. So if you want to take a look at how this works, by all means, go to our website, download the trial, and you can test the software for yourself and see what it can do. Of course, for the storage, a slightly different story, where we can make sure that we have test boxes available if you want to play with this as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, just in closing, everybody, just to say thank you once again for joining us on the call today. We have been recording the webinar, so we will forward a copy of the recording across to everybody who's on the call here today. If any of your colleagues were unable to make it, you're more than welcome to share that with them so they can see this great content as well. But thanks to Yap, thanks to everybody in StorageCraft and Oneblox for the time today. Thank you for attending, and look forward to speaking to you on our next webinar. Thank you very much, everybody, and bye-bye.